I fell asleep on a night bus and woke up in a perfect city. This story was supposed to have a happy ending, as those that start horribly usually do. But I realized that in the end my hero is unlikely to slay the dragon and get the girl. It's more likely to end here and now, when the plastic parasite puts on my bleeding skin. Calling the police isn't an option. I'll end up with the locals anyway, and I can't leave Greensville. Google Maps shows me as a blue dot on a blank canvas, stuck on an empty plain with no roads, no mountains, nothing at all. I know this isn't true. There is a city here. But this place, if it can even be called that, is not of our world. The perfect little town is just a nightmare in a pretty wrapper. It started a few days ago, I guess. Time leaks away here like water, seeping through the cracks and turning everything into a blur. The sun sets at odd hours and rises when it pleases. Nothing moves as it should. Or if it does, it moves like a broken clock, faltering, stopping and suddenly surging forward at random intervals. It all started the minute I turned 18. That's when I left the trailer park. I left with almost nothing. A duffel bag on my shoulder, a cigarette in my teeth, and a small jar of change I'd saved from my summer earnings. But that was enough. I didn't need anything else to escape from the disgusting cesspool and leave behind a tapestry of horrible memories. I had no idea where to go, but the place didn't matter. I only wanted to see this dead end of evolution in my rearview mirror. I lived in an Ozarks neighborhood that well deserved the unofficial motto, meth, death, and cigar. It also definitely described the man formerly known as my father, a man I'd rather see dead. That was it. I was off to start my life. Anywhere but here. I wandered towards the bus station and thought about everything. Where will I go when I get there? What would I become? There were still no answers when I finally reached the station in the early evening, a wooden box standing on a deserted stretch of road surrounded by dense forest. There was practically no one there. There was a shabby homeless man huddled by the front door, a few elderly people inside, and a pimply-faced girl who looked no older than me on duty behind the counter. I put my bag between my legs and looked at the bus listings. Where to? The cashier asked in a haggard, nasal voice. The future spread out before me, a bottomless well of possibilities. Los Angeles, New York, El Paso, Seattle, and a place called Greensville. What the hell is Greensville? It sounded like something out of an out-of-print Dr. Seuss book. Where is that? I pointed out Greensville on the board above the booth window. I don't have X-ray vision, the cashier sighed. Night bus to Greensville? The girl frowned. I don't know. Do you want me to check? I hesitated. There was a certain charm to a place called Greensville. I could almost envision manicured lawns so strikingly green it hurt to look at, a soft blue sky with clouds as perfect as a postcard, houses staring off into the distance in neat rows. That's the kind of place I'd like to be in. A place where people smiled at their neighbors and always waved hello. And if Greensville turned out to be a lousy shithole, I'd rather not know until I got there. Because not knowing meant everything could have been perfect there. Not knowing meant I could spend the entire bus ride daydreaming about what might be waiting for me. No, that's exactly where I'm headed. One ticket to Greensville. Asterisk asterisk asterisk. There's something weird and creepy about an empty bus stop in the middle of the night. It's like it's a portal to another dimension, something that lurks between our world and the beyond, and it's only by sheer luck that you don't fall through a crack in the facade. It was late. I was getting nervous. Darkness had descended, taking away the lights and the buses that had been running all day. I hadn't seen a single car for at least an hour, and my bus was late. At least 30 minutes late. It was supposed to be here at 9:45, but just then, headlights lit up the road like two burning eyes. A small lump of excitement rose inside me as the ancient bus, looking like a sad, resentful dog, rolled down the quiet road. I put out my cigarette and picked up my bag. The bus barreled to a stop. The driver opened the door. He looked strange. I couldn't tell what was wrong, but he looked like he'd been assembled in a mannequin factory, perfect mop of black hair, starched uniform, porcelain skin, a wide toothy smile that greeted me from behind the wheel. Going to Greensville? He asked in a high and squeaky but not unpleasant voice. That's right, I said, getting on the bus and holding out my ticket. How long is the ride? He frowned, as if he didn't understand. How long will the ride take? I clarified. His smile grew brighter. Oh, you just make yourself comfortable, and I'll take you where you need to go. I started to turn away, thinking. One more thing. Where is Greensville? His smile grew wider, into a ridiculously gigantic grin. Oh, exactly where it should be. Okay, weird, but I brushed it off. Some people were weirdos. God knows I'd met many in the land of meth, death, and cigar. Thanking the driver, I looked around the bus for an empty seat, and there were many. There were only 2 other passengers inside, one at the front of the bus and one closer to the middle, both men in long coats and fedoras pulled low over their eyes. If I'd had a hat, I could have done the same. Instead, I pulled my jacket over my head and settled into the back seat, ready for the night drive to Greensville. I blinked awake and found myself under the open sky, a deep, cool blue sky dotted with clouds. My head was pounding slowly and rhythmically, my brain beating against the walls of my skull like a terrible drum. Writhing in pain, I stood up and looked around. Beside me, in the shade of a bright green awning, stood a wooden bench. A bus stop. A bench straight out of a 1950s movie screen. Unscratched, unstained, perfectly clean. In other words, brand new. So was the patch of grass below me, flooded with sunlight, and something was wrong. Running my fingers into the thick greenery, I realized it was artificial grass. It seemed dead and dirty. I jerked my hand away as if from a hot frying pan. But all of that was immediately forgotten when I saw the postcard-like sign, painted in garish colors, depicting the city of my dreams: perfect lawns, perfect houses, smiling people waving at each other. A place where they didn't know what meth, death, and haze were. The perfect little suburb of the 1950s. Old-fashioned little cars, women in dresses, men in suits. At least that's what the sign promised. The arc-curved slogan read, "Welcome to Greensville. Smile like you mean it." I covered my eyes and looked out over the city, preparing to be disappointed, expecting to see a dying abandoned hole, cracked and drab like the heel of an old shoe, or maybe some giant incinerator throwing oceans of garbage into the sky. But no, of course it wasn't. Everything was perfect. Like a movie set, too fragile for this world. But it wasn't a set, it was real. It appeared to me like the Emerald City. Brick-paved streets, trees and bushes surrounding the cozy main street, a church with a steeple sticking out on a mowed lawn, and everything was divided into neat little sectors that seemed so right. And the countryside. That's the thing, I couldn't see beyond the city. Everything in the distance was out of focus, hidden behind a strange shimmering haze, like a haze over hot asphalt. But I didn't pay any attention to it. All I saw was the small town of my dreams. I saw only the small town of my nightmares. Everything was exactly as the sign promised. Old-fashioned cars, perfect houses, a main street with cafes, shopping rows, clothing stores. But it was a ghost town. Nothing moved. Nothing breathed. Only the wind blew me around the city with my bag behind me. I looked for signs of life. A bird, a stray cat, a rat rummaging through the garbage. And I found nothing. Nothing but people. People in stores. Behind the wheel of cars. Behind the counter of a diner, frozen in the scenes of a merry meal. Forever frozen in silent routine. Because they weren't people at all. They were mannequins. The first one that came to mind was the Call of Duty game Nuketown. The second was the movie Indiana Jones, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. I thought of Indy, who'd piled into a town like this one, only to hide in a lead-lined refrigerator when the fierce breath of an atomic blast consumed everything in sight. I pulled out my phone, fully expecting no connection. There was one division. Typed Greensville into the search with the hope of for something. Greensville didn't exist for Google. Panic built up inside me. I dialed 911 and got an answering machine. A plastic voice saying plastic words, just something mimicking human manners and politeness. I got goosebumps. "You've reached the Greensville elite. We're pulling out right now, but if you leave your name and..." I dropped the call and stopped. Everything seemed awful. The freshly painted signs, the freshly paved roads, everything was so wrong. There was not a single thought in my head. Anxiety and confusion shut down my brain. Rational thinking was suddenly gone. leaving me drowning in my thoughts, searching for some plan of action. Nothing came to mind. And then it did. It came. Dancing somewhere behind my eyes in flashing red neon. The realization that something was very, very wrong here. Then something moved at the edge of my vision. I turned sharply. And found myself looking at my own distorted reflection of my face in the diner window. But it wasn't my reflection that was moving, of that I was sure. Something was moving on the other side of the glass. In a building with a sign on the door that read, "Welcome, we're open." I stepped closer. The sunlight reflected off the shiny clean glass, turning the inside of the diner into a dark abyss. I put my palms against the window and peered inside. And at first I didn't realize what I was seeing. A horrible, slippery shiver ran down my spine. My stomach twisted with horror. I stood pressing myself against the glass and stared at the mannequins, once engrossed in their plastic meal. Only now all heads turned, and stared directly at me. I jumped back and did what my instincts told me to do. I ran. Blind. Swift flight to somewhere, anywhere, but away from here. The buildings were a solid canvas of color, but I could feel plastic men, women, and children turning their plastic heads to look at me. I could feel their dead eyes digging into my neck as I turned from the main street into a quiet alley. I crashed into a garbage can, one that I've never known and will never know the taste of garbage. I took a deep breath and finally wondered what I was going to do. Bus stop. Yeah, we should go back to. Where was the bus stop? I looked out of the alley and looked both ways. Main Street was left behind, and now there was pure suburbia all around, with just a couple of large buildings, a church, a courthouse, and a bright red fire station. The town had become a sea of green, stretching as far as the eye could see. There was no bus stop. There was nothing but Greensville. I looked at the perfect city, quiet and lifeless, like a postcard, and felt my hopes and dreams crumble. This was supposed to be my new life. And it turned out to be. Somebody's hands grabbed me from behind and dragged me back into the alley. And I screamed. The man in the suit was covered in blood. Soaked in it. I hardly recognized him. His face, a bloody, mangled mess, hung in shreds from his bone-white skull. He was on a bus to Greensville. There were two of them. Fedoras pulled over their eyes, coats over their suits. And now one of them was dying. He was moving like a dying animal hit by a pickup truck. Clutching at my shirt with bloody hands and trying to get up. I don't think he realized he was missing both of his legs, they had been crudely torn off above the knees. There was nothing left but mangled stumps from which blood was gushing forcefully. "Please," he moaned in a hoarse voice. "Run." He collapsed to the ground, a puppet with its strings cut, and I heard a muffled thud from beneath his jacket. I swallowed, genuinely wanting to run away and not wanting to touch the tattered suit, still warm from the red blood. But I was from the land of meth, death, and cigar, and I knew immediately what that knock was. With a wince, I carefully unzipped his jacket, revealing a .38 caliber pistol lying neatly in a shoulder holster. Next to it, in an inside pocket, lay a badge. Driven only by curiosity, I pulled it out and unfolded it. SPA, Supernatural Law Enforcement Agency. What the fuck was that? But I didn't care. All I wanted was the revolver. It would be nice to hold it in my hands. Comforting. I unbuckled the holster and reached for the gun. "Don't frown," the plastic voice said. I looked up and saw the man's partner standing at the entrance to the alley. His face, blank and inexpressive, instantly gave away who he had become. "One of them. Everyone smiles here," he muttered. "It's the only rule." Then his face stretched, and I realized he wasn't just a mannequin, he was something much, much worse. I drew my gun. The mannequin's head snapped in half, the top part tipping back as if on a hinge, revealing a mouth full of jagged, needle-sharp teeth made of broken porcelain. Its eyes, black and lifeless, became slits, 4 huge insect-like outgrowths erupting on the sides of the plastic parasite. The grinning creature fell forward and crawled toward me on all fours like some nightmarish insect, like a hermit cancer hiding in the shell of a mannequin. It rushed up the alley. A high, rattling shriek escaped from deep in its throat. More screams erupted in response. Dozens, hundreds of screams erupted from every house and street, every store and building in Greensville. All these fake people with their fake lives and fake clothes were infected with something. Something that was squirming and wriggling just behind the plastic smiles. That hunch knocked me off my feet like a freight train. A flash of fear consumed my tiny, imperfect world like a black hole. Swallowed the walls of the alley. Swallowed the revolver in my hand. The veil of darkness blocked my vision, and the plastic parasite kept coming. I had to run. I couldn't move. There was only fear all around, a sharp fear encompassing me on all sides. I drew air into my lungs and turned it into a roar. A revolver materialized in my hands, heavy and soothing. I pointed it and found the trigger. Bam, bam, bam. 3.38 caliber bullets pierced the creature through and through. Plastic and blood splattered all around. One insect-like limb ripped off a joint. Half of its face exploded and the creature finally collapsed to the ground. The world around me cleared up dramatically. I struggled to get to my feet, ran like the wind. I found myself on the main street, face to face with an army of mannequins. There were hundreds of them. Men, women, children. A sea of summer dresses, khaki pants, polo shirts and suits. A wall of smiling plastic faces, barely containing what lurked beneath them. There were 3 rounds left in the revolver that hung limply at my side. I would need 3,000, and even then there would be no chance of victory. And, as if to emphasize this thought, the inhabitants of Greensville changed. Their heads tilted back at once, revealing jagged teeth. Insect-like outgrowths burrowed through their plastic sides, ripping through their clothes, tasting the air. An army of perfect humans transformed. The plastic parasites broke out of their shells. The air was filled with a cacophony of rattling screams. I turned to run. And found myself surrounded by dozens of smiling creatures scurrying along the walls of buildings, through alleys and storefronts. And that was the end. The end for a kid who wanted nothing so much as just an eraser to erase the past and start over. It broke my heart. The crushing realization that here and now was the only thing I could control. I put the revolver to my chin and saw a sewer drain embedded in the curb. Plastic vermin were piling up on all sides. I didn't hesitate, just kicked at the grate. Then I dove forward with my feet into the narrow chute, hoping I wouldn't crack my skull on the sharp concrete edge. The sky and light disappeared, and I fell into darkness. The impact with the ground knocked all the air out of me. I wheezed and staggered to my feet, desperately trying to escape the streak of sunlight coming through the gutter. In the narrow slit above, the outlines of the creatures floated by. Screams drifted together. I trudged forward in the darkness, wandering through the maze of mud and slime that lurked beneath the postcard-perfect city. The farther I made my way through the filthy corridors and silt-filled passages, the quieter the screams became. I walked along the river of thick brown sludge gurgling downstream, hoping it would spit me out into the sunlight somewhere far, far away from here. But the only sunlight I saw was the one coming through the sewer grates. Sometimes I stopped to look at the city that was to be my new beginning, a city filled with mannequins, and frozen in time. Frozen exactly until whatever lived beneath the plastic shell decided to wake up. And so I wandered around for days. Blurred images, scraps of memories, my endless journey through the sewers of Greensville. Some time later, I found the boiler room. I walked down a narrow hallway, descended a spiral staircase, and found myself in a wide, cave-like room. It was flooded with a strange subterranean light and was littered with thick pipes and tanks, dials and levers. So biblical. A huge living organism, pulsing with terrifying energy, hissing steam, billowing smoke. The heat was unbearable. My God, I whispered, realizing what lay behind the equipment. Thick layers of flesh rippled in the spaces between the pipes and vats as if something huge, a horrible mountain of hot meat, was covering the metal like a husk. I could smell the sour odor. It filled my throat and entered my lungs. It was excruciating. I couldn't bear it. I put the revolver to my temple and pulled the trigger. The gun didn't go off. The floor was not colored with the last pattern of my thoughts and feelings. There was only a powerless click that made me want to bend in half in a fit of insane laughter. When falling into the sewer, I must have moved the cylinder. It was an easy fix. I squeezed the trigger twice. Click. Bam. The stray bullet whistled across the room and hit the vat. With a hiss, An angry jet of steam burst out, turning into a boiling cloud. And a thought hit me like a hammer. There's no one here. I have no one to call. No one to tell. No one but you. My nameless, faceless accomplice. The phone clung to life long enough for me to finish writing this. I only have 2% left to tell you how it ends. When I started writing, the end was lost in a hazy haze. Now it's clear, drenched in blood and entrails. It's certainly not a happy ending. Stories like this, even the best ones, usually don't favor people like me. My fate was sealed from the moment it began. I tried to rewrite the ending, and look where it got me. In the heat of a dying boiler room. I've spent the better part of an hour turning every disc and lever I could find, and now the place, what hides a massive pile of flesh, is brewing something powerful in its innards. The explosion, I hope, will destroy the city once and for all. Every dial in sight is in the red zone, hands shuddering fearfully, steam billowing out and heat rising. I don't know if this living creature of flesh, the one behind the pipes, is the city's mistress, its mother, or its brain. But I do know that fire is the cure for insanity. And once I finish curing Greensville, none of its plastic parasites will ever smile again.